This is not going to end well. Coco, look at the camera. Look at the camera. Look. There, ooh, it was close. There she is. Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Coco's a little scared that she's on this. She's too high for herself right now. Look, say hi. Say hi. Okay. You want to sit down? This is not sustainable. I'm gonna put you down. Say goodbye. Bye, Coco. Well, not you. We just had dinner not too long ago, so she's a little chicken crazy right now. Good evening, everybody. Hopefully this video finds you well. It's the last video of the week. It's been a long week of grading. For me specifically, with my high school students, it's been a lot of wrangling kids, trying to find kids, trying to get students to do work when I'm not there, and lots of mandatory Zoom calls that ended up becoming me and two other students that actually read their email that day. But hopefully you all are doing okay. Hopefully your exams are going okay. I've been, as I said before, I usually stay posted on the UMD subreddit, and some of those exams seem like they're not the most well run and not the greatest way of you all demonstrating your mastery of the content and the work there. So hopefully everything's okay. Again, this one's going to be sort of a fun video. Fun video. We're going to talk about how to access an API that we haven't written, an API that somebody else, some business or something has. I'm not going to go through all of the specifics for all APIs because all of them are different, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But we're going to talk about specifically two different ones and see how we connect to them and are able to use them. Coco's looking for some crumbs. There she goes. All right. So let me pull up the slides because right now I'm staring at myself. All right, so these are the same slides that I used last time, and I'll make sure I upload them. I forgot to last time, but we're going to be testing out a couple of different. This is actually not what I was talking about. We were talking about using get specifically with Express, and towards the tail end here, we're going to talk about specifically APIs and how they work and how we are able to use them. So we talked about all this stuff. I'm not going to go over it again. Watch the previous video for that. Let's jump right into what an API is, because I've used this acronym a lot, and I'm sure you've heard it a lot as well. But essentially, it's Application Programming Interface. Essentially, what it means is, think of it as a menu of items that you can then access. The rules are set by whoever created that API. The way you interact with it is however they dictate it. It can hide behind paywalls. It can be completely free. Every single different one is different from each other and has sort of different ways of interacting. But the core way that you interact is using these different CRUD operations. It's not going to be any different from that. Now, how many times you can request things and use GET, how many times you can post, whether you can put stuff on there, all that's going to be different. And they might force you to use some middleware, which is essentially pre-written sort of, I won't say software, but essentially modules that will bridge the gap between what you can write and the modules that the people who wrote the API or who manage the API have. So we'll talk about that specifically for two different ones, for Twitter and Yelp. And I'm putting these links here so that you're able to get to them. Let me just quickly take a moment, and I'm going to set up my two different examples real quick. But while I'm doing that, go ahead and pause the video here. go to these links and make sure you're able to follow along with them to see what I've got. All right. All right, let's continue on then. Now that I have everything all set up, what I would like you to do, and this is something that I'm going to leave open for you on the next exercise, but it might be easier for everybody, is for you to create a Twitter account if you don't have one already, and also apply for a Twitter developer account. I'll explain why in a moment, but it might be helpful for you to look into that right now. If you already have a Twitter account, you can easily do that. So when we're looking at each of these sort of proprietary APIs, there's a couple different parts that we'll have to go through, and hoops essentially that we have to jump through. First, of course, you have to have an account with that company. So for example, I have an account with Twitter. I'll show you my Twitter account in a moment. I have an account with Yelp. Whatever company you need to use their API, essentially you need to create an account ahead of time just for their own security purposes, and also sometimes they hold their sort of services there behind a couple of paywalls, so they want you to pay before then. Typically, also, they will make you create a project and describe to them why are you worthy, I guess is a good way of saying it, of using their API. What are you going to be using it for? Is it something that is for a business? Is it something educational? All those different things. They'll ask you a couple of different questions when you do that. And then from there, they will give you a client ID, an API key, and consumer ID, and a secret consumer ID is what the last one is. Essentially, these are different keys that are essentially your way of authenticating that this is you, the person who has that account, that is going to be requesting from the API. You have to have those things in your file ahead of time in order for any of this to work, or else it won't be able to authenticate, and then it just won't run anything properly. And again, you might have to interact with some slightly different CRUD operations, so with post and get and pull and all those different ones essentially that we talked about before. And put, sorry, not pull. So let's go ahead and jump into an example. And this is one that I think is pretty easy for everybody to sort of reach. I'm going to go to Twitter. So I'm going to search Twitter developer. Developer.twitter.com. Now you'll see that I already even logged in because this is mine, and it's Elias Aurelius project. This is what I did with my students the last year, as I gave them a project with my Twitter API. But essentially, with your Twitter account, you can create an account that is a developer account, where then you can access anything that they sort of have. So let me show you my dashboard real quick with some stuff. You can see they'll monitor and take a look at how much of their services you're using. This I think is for some of the paid stuff, so I won't have anything because I haven't paid for sort of the premium versions of their services. And let me go directly to the projects. So I'm going to go to apps. There we go. Okay, so there's my first app, and then this is the one that I'm going to be using specifically for this class. Let me open it up. Okay, so this is essentially what I had to send into Twitter. And when you go in and you create a new project, you'll go to getting started, and then you can create a new project from there, I believe. Yep, create an app right there. You'll have to answer all of these questions, and I don't know. It's not terribly hard. I only have to do like 2 sentences at a time. But you'll be processed pretty quickly, at least for me. Because I already had an account before, it was immediate that it allowed me to create a new project. If you are a new Twitter user, it might force you to wait 48 hours, I believe. But I can't remember exactly if there's a timeline or not, or I might be thinking of a different service. But for the next exercise, I'm trying to decide and see how I can force you all to use Twitter. But essentially, I recommend that you start ahead of time. If you already have a Twitter account, perfect. And of course, you can always use a different sort of API, anyone that you choose. But I'm going to show you right now Twitter. I'm going to keep going. So from here, you have these are the app details, and then you'll see permissions for that. I can read and write to my account, which makes sense. And lastly, there are my keys and tokens here. Now, these are the ones that I'm going to be using right now with your example. Of course, I'll regenerate them, and I can revoke them at any time. So, if somebody gets a hold of my account and starts posting weird stuff that isn't for me, I can go in here and sort of mess with these a little bit. And these will come in handy in a moment. But essentially, once you have these set, then these are the keys for you to be able to run with Twitter services here and be able to use it and do just about anything. Now, what we will be using is, and I believe I have it. Let's do this. We will be using Twitter's specific module that they have. And it's kind of a middleware that Twitter has written for you to be able to easily use their API. So you'll notice here that this module has already been installed, and I can do require Twitter, call it Twitter, sort of like what we've seen before with HTTP, and then create a new instance. Before you do this and before you write any sort of code, please make sure. So right now I'm in the file system, so I'm in the folder that I want to run this example in. Before you do anything else, go ahead and run npm install Twitter. And this will install all the modules necessary for you to interact with the Twitter API. So once you have this here, then I recommend you create a new file in there, and then you start writing this. And so this is what I want you to have. So pause this video right now. Go ahead and type this out, especially taking a specific look at how we create an instance of Twitter to create a client. Make sure that these are exactly in order, because that's the way that it might not have to be exactly in order, but just call them make the variables at least exactly the same name with the underscores there, because that's what it's going to look for in order to authenticate that you are allowed to use their API. And if you don't have those things there, then it's not going to work. So pause the video here, make sure you have this, and then start it up again. All right, assuming you already have this, you already have an account, your app is set up, and you have consumer keys, the secret key, the token key, the secret token key, all these different things. Then what I recommend you do is you copy and paste each of these into the specific places that they need to go. I already have them written down, so I'm just going to copy and paste that into here. So now it should look a little bit like this. So now essentially we have a client that is an instance of a Twitter module. And now we can we'll be able to use post next time when we talk about post. Client, if I can spell, we'll be using get. We'll be able to use client dot post get. Why am I blanking right now? I keep forgetting. It's the second time I've forgotten this one. Put. Oh my goodness. Put. It's the second time. We'll be able to use versions of each of the CRUD operations, specifically get and post in the next 2 weeks. Put and delete. I believe Twitter has a different way of naming put and delete, so we won't be able to use those just yet. But at least we'll specifically be able to use post and get right now. Now, before I write a get request, and notice here you can sort of see what the get request is going to look like. It'll have a string, parameters, string for the path, parameters, and I'm looking right. I won't be able to. There we go. I'm looking here right now, but the Twitter.get, it requires a string for the path, parameters that are the request parameters that Twitter allow you to have, and a callback function. That is a Twitter callback function that they require. And so those are the things that you're going to have to need to use in order to get something. Now, before when we talked about get, we were able to do something very similar where we did the path and then the callback function with request, comma, response. That's what we were able to do before. Because this is proprietary, wow, I'm really struggling with that word today. Proprietary, things are a little different, and so we'll have to use specifically what Twitter has written. And so now let's navigate back to that link that I posted over here. So I'm looking specifically here at this page right here. So post, retrieve, and engage with tweets. And you'll be able to see all of the different things that you can use here. There's post for the statuses updates, post for destroying a status by a specific ID. So this is in lieu of having delete. This is the way that you can remove it. You can get statuses, get embedded. I'm guessing this is embedded statuses. It's in an embedded format. Never mind. Won't have to worry about that too much. Look up statuses, post retweets by ID, unretweet something. Essentially, this is like hard mode of using Twitter. So you being able to access a specific page in a specific tweet, posting specific things. It's just you being able to do that through your server rather than through the UI of Twitter normally. And so, let's go through this example first, since I already have this tab open right now. We're gonna use get, and the path that we're gonna be using in other words, the service that we're gonna be using is status lookup. And so status lookup is essentially going to be that path, that first parameter that we're going to use in our get request. So we can read through here, and I'm not going to read through all of it right now because I'm expecting that you're also on this page and taking a look at it. But essentially, you can see all of the different information for what you'll be able to access and what you'll be able to do with this get request. So you can look for up to 100 tweets per request. You can separate things by comma, starting with ID to be able to see which ID for which specific tweet you want to get. And then there's a couple of other things to note here, specifically about if somebody has a protected Twitter account, you won't be able to necessarily access it. It also won't be in order. Just some stuff there. You can see here what the limits are for you to be able to do this. Of course, if you have like a super, I don't know, if you have an actual app by a company, you're going to have to go to the premium account and pay for more than 900 tweets at a time or 300 requests at a time. But for us, we're just not going to be going at that high level. So next are the parameters. So this is the second parameter themselves in the get request. These are all the different things that we're going to be able to pass in as a JSON. And I'll explain what that looks like in a moment, but essentially we can narrow down the specific tweet that we're trying to search for by the ID, whatever the entities are, trimming, all these different things. I'm not going to go through all of them. Honestly, I haven't used more than maybe one or two at a time when I'm going through tweets. But this is essentially the way that we can do that with our parameters, is narrowing things down. And lastly here, is our example response. This is partially important so that you know what you're getting, so you know what sort of format you're getting, and you can be able to check to make sure that what you're getting back is correct. But also, the more important thing here is if I want to be able to access any sort of specific information, and so I want to grab this JSON and parse it into something that looks a little more feasible, or also something that is more usable to me, to send back to the client, for example, you can for sure count that the tweets are going to be formatted in this exact way. So that way I can go into this array, which is going to be an array of the tweets that it finds with that ID. And you'll be able to access each of these different fields by just doing whatever the name of the variable that you assign this JSON to, dot created at, or dot ID, or dot ID string. And so this is your way of being able to access the information and be able to use it. And so if I'm only specifically looking, for example, in my to send back to the client or to render to a page, I only want to see what the time zone is. I can just go specifically to the time zone, know where it is, and notice that it's null. And so I believe in Twitter's API, if you go more down the rabbit hole, you'll get to see what the different options are for each of these different fields inside of the JSON. But for right now, we're not going to be worrying about that too much. All right, so that's a lot of me talking and explaining this page essentially. But let's actually work on this. Let's actually try it out. So again, my URL is statuses lookup. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy this because I don't want to type it out. And I'm going to go over here. And remember, this is the format that we need to pass in information into the GET request. First is the path as a string. So I'm going to go ahead and create a string. And I put the path there. It's exactly what they put on there. That's why it says get and then statuses / lookup. This is me saying that I want to use that service. Comma. Next thing. I can do the callback if I don't want to have an ID or I don't want to have a what's the word that I'm looking for? Parameter, sorry. If I don't want to have a parameter for the ID, then I can skip that. But for now, I'm actually going to do it. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable. Let's say let search param equal, and I'm going to create a JavaScript object, and I'm going to at least do ID to see which ID I want to look for. So this is me narrowing down what specifically I'm searching for using this tool statuses lookup. Then I'll be able to pass in here search param, comma, and then last comes my my callback function. And please pay special attention to what this callback function actually needs to use. And in this case, it's going to be function. And then I'm going to have error, and it'll tell you actually right there. You might have just seen it. Error, data, and then response. So those are the three parameters for the callback function that it needs you to create. So in other words, error, comma, data, comma, response. And this was a question that I got in office hours, and I got sometimes on Piazza as well, as when we were doing our GET requests in the callback function, or when we were creating our our server using the HTTP module, why did I do request, comma, response? That's just something that's auto formatted that it needs, because HTTP and Express is defining the way that you communicate between the client and the server. So it has to have a callback function in a very specific way. Same way here. We have to have a callback function exactly in this order with error, comma, data, comma, response. All right, so this is essentially the skeleton of what I'm doing. Last thing I'm just going to sort of just write in here is I'm going to say if it is an error, then I'm going to console.log the error. And then next I'm going to say else I'm going to just print out the data. So I'm just going to do console.log data. So just to sort of say and put it into words why I always do not error here. This is a weird JavaScript thing. So if there is no let me think for a moment, sorry. I believe it is not error. Hold on, let me go back to my Yeah, it is. Okay, sorry. I just had a brain fart there. All right, so this is my way of checking if it is an error. It's going to do the opposite of it, and it's going to actually go and trigger that is true, because it'll be a falsy value, the error itself. So it'll trigger to be true, and then go inside of this if statement. Truthy and falsy values are kind of weird with JavaScript. You can look up into them if you want, but this is essentially the format for me to say, oh, if it was an error, then don't print anything, or don't do this other action, and do this if statement in here. Otherwise, do the other stuff. That's essentially it. All right, so I have it all set up. The one thing that I'm missing here, and the reason why I have an error over here, is I don't have an ID for, and I didn't spell this correct. I don't have an ID for the tweet that I'm searching for. And again, I'm doing statuses lookup. So I'm looking for a specific status that somebody has tweeted out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Twitter. And also, if you want to follow my Twitter, I'm more than happy to have you follow me. I don't have very many followers. The Elias Gonzalez with no E. Well, it's a shared E between the and Elias. But anyway, let us go to a tweet. Let's do, what's one that's good? Let's go to We Rate Dogs. That's a good one. There we go. The Good Dogs Front. All right. There was one that I saw yesterday. Oh, this was the one that I saw yesterday. So this one's also good because it's retweeting something already. So if I want to look at the ID for a tweet, all you have to do is click into it. And at the top here at the URL, as we've been sort of talking about before, that URLs often give more information than you sort of think, based on the last lecture we talked about. This right here is our ID. So I just copy this, paste it over here as a string, and we're good to go. So now what I can do, and again, make sure that you have written this code, and before you run it, that you've installed Twitter, or else it's not going to work. I'm just going to go ahead and do npm install Twitter. Oh, sorry, not that again. I'm going to do node, what is this called? Twitter example. There we go. Uh-oh, no. Why are you no? Okay, so let's take a look. Error, print the error. Let's do something, instead of printing error, let's do not good. It might be because this tweet is a little old. It's from yesterday. This might be why this is running into an issue. Yeah. Let's do this. Let's find a more recent tweet because I think this one's from yesterday. Yeah, it's from yesterday. Let's do a more recent one. I also want to make sure that I'm using a public account. Ball is life. Not ball is life. Let's do, don't want to do something with Trump in it. Let's do Terry Crews. Actually, I saw this first. Andre Braugher. If you watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, tonight's the season finale. I think I'm missing it right now. So again, I'm just going to grab the status here. The ID, sorry, the status ID. And I'm going to go here, paste the ID number. And then I'm going to run it. Let's make sure that it works. Not good. Ruh-roh. What did I do wrong? Search param equal. Not good. Statuses lookup. Console.log. Yada yada yada. Okay, let me pause this and see what the issue is because I don't know. What? I knew I was wrong when I did that. Not. Should have been if error. All right. So that's why I wasn't confident about what my answer was there. So again, falsy values, then it'll, so if error is truthy, so in order if the error actually has something in it, so there was an error in this callback function, so it passes in an actual error, then it'll go inside this if statement, otherwise it won't. What I was just doing right there is it actually worked, and so I was doing not, and so it was going to the wrong one. Anyway, this is the way it should be. Take away the exclamation point, the not right there. You should be good to go. All right, so I'm going to clear this and show you sort of what I'm going to get back here. So I'm running it. So using Node, don't do npm start. That's only for React. Node Twitter example, and we can see our handy dandy tweet here, and lots of different information. So when it was created, the text of the tweet, truncated, the source of it, the name of the user, all those different things going in from there. So there we are. That's essentially it. Now, a couple things I want you to notice here, because this is going to come in handy for your exercises. This is an array containing one value inside of it. So it's an array containing a JSON object. That's the way just that it's created. And so make sure that before you use any sort of information, always just print it out first, just to see what the formatting is, just in case you forget. So for example here, if I wanted to just print out the tweet itself, or the JSON for the tweet itself, instead of just the array, I could change this over here to be data 0. Now if I run it, and I'm gonna, nope, clear. Now if I run it again, now it's taking away the array and it's just the JSON. And so now I can actually go in here and just go to specifically each data point. So now I can do, and I'm actually going to do this in a separate variable. Let's do let tweet JSON equal data at 0, which is the tweet there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say tweet JSON dot, and now I can go to any one of these different pieces of information here. So I specifically want to do user and see what that gives me back. And it should hopefully give me another JSON or another JavaScript object inside of it describing who tweeted it out. So all of that information there. So let's do that. There you go. Now it only gave me the ID of the user, the name of it, all that stuff that was inside of this right here. Whoops. Where am I going? It's inside the user right here. So I was just looking inside. And then now if I want to go even further, let's say that I want to just print Andre Brager's screen name. I can do dot screen underscore name. Save it. Print it out. And it gave me Andre Brager. So this is my way of parsing down a JSON essentially. So I looked at specifically the first piece of data that was given to me. I looked at the user field inside of it, and then the screen name field, and I just print that out, and now it printed out Andre Brager down here. Let me see if the We Rate Dogs one would work as well. There we go. Let's try this out. Do this. Paste it here. Save it. And now I can do it again. And it does dog rates, which is the name of the user. Now if I just do tweet JSON, print out the actual tweet itself, let's see. All right, so here it is. And I like this example here just because it has a lot more information, mostly because it is retweeting something that's already there. You can see the description here is something that's already even points you to a web page for them. All right, here we go, quoted status. This was something that before for our other example was empty. Quoted status. believe it's over here. Didn't even show up because it wasn't quoted. Yeah, is quoted status is false, and then for this one is true, and that's why it displays. Yeah, is quoted status is true, and then it displays the tweet that it is retweeting. So again, this one is an example of something that's retweeting this Ray L tweet, and so you can see the information for that other tweet in sort of like a linked list kind of way there. So tweet JSON, and then let me say I want to print out the text inside of there. I'm just going to do tweet JSON.text. And now if I run that, clear, and there you go. So now it tweeted out the actual text of that tweet that I'm grabbing from, and there we go. And then it also puts the link to this other tweet inside of it as well. So if I copy this right here and I pasted it in a new tab, yep, it takes me there. So that's a way of sort of managing that. It has a tweet embedded inside of it as well. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. This is, again, me searching for a status specifically, which can be useful. But again, this one's kind of counterintuitive in the sense that we already know the ID for the tweet that's already been given. We don't necessarily have, I don't know. That seemed like you can just go to Twitter and figure that out. And it's not something that's helping you a whole lot, other than it being through a server rather than you going into the Twitter webpage. Now let's switch to one of the actual examples that's going to be useful for you. And that is the standard search API. And so this is one that you can use to search for any tweets that have whatever relevant information inside of them. And so rather than already knowing the IDs there, you can essentially grab a whole bunch of tweets, I believe 15 at a time, with whatever query you decide to pass in. So let's go step by step and let's make sure that we are setting this up correctly, and allowing ourselves to get a lot of different tweets for our the best bang for our buck, essentially. So now notice before we started with the URL being get statuses lookup. So it was the .get, and then we did statuses lookup here. With the standard search API, it doesn't quite say exactly what that URL is, but what you can easily do here is go to this URL right here. Anything before the JSON and after the version level, you can just copy this and paste that into here. Search tweets. All right. So we have that down. We have our URL. Now let's see. This is our information. Again, of course, we need authentication and all that sort of stuff. All right, parameters that we need. So you have to, it's required that you have the query that you're searching by. 500 character maximum, including operators. They may be limited by complexity. They're UTF-8 and that formatting for text. Next, you can search by geocode if you wanted to. You can search by the language. You can search by the locale, the result type, the count. You can limit the amount that you're getting. Defaults to 15. Yeah, there it is. That's what I thought. Defaults to 15, so you'll see that in a moment, and we can make that bigger or smaller if we wanted to, and lots of other different things. And here we go. Here's what the response is going to look like. So the responses are going to come in a JSON, not an array, in a JSON. That's why it has the curly brace there. For which that the statuses field inside of it is actually an array of tweets. That was very confusing, but it's a JSON that consists of a statuses field that inside of that statuses field has all of the different statuses that match that query that you just passed in. So it's sort of like one of those Russian nesting dolls of information. But Again, it'll always look like this, so you can sort of somewhat hard code your code there to go down the line and look for a specific piece inside of that statuses field. So let's go ahead and use this. So again, we need to have in our parameters a Q for query. So I'm going to change this. Instead of being ID, it's going to be this Q for query. And in here, the string, I'm going to put whatever I want to query by. And let's continue with our theme of we rate dogs. I want to search by dog rates. So I want to search for anything that's mentioning we rate dogs. So dog underscore rates. So again, this search parameters, this has to match up with whatever the required parameters are here. So Q was what it was for this one. For our previous example was ID. And then you can separate them even more if you wanted to. So you can do, if I wanted to do by geocode as well, I could do Q, comma, geocode. I don't know. I don't really know latitude and longitude of where you want to do this, but you can sort of keep going there and separate by comma so that you narrow your search even further. All right, so we have our URL, we have our search parameter that we're searching by, we have our, if we get an error, the data, and a response. We're not really going to be dealing with responses just yet, or at all really in this example. This I will have to change because I no longer am just, and actually before I do anything any further, I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to create a new file. That way I don't have to rewrite it again later on. Twitter example search. There we go. I'm going to revert this one a little bit to the, okay, there we go. All right, so I'm looking at this example now. So URL parameters are different. Function. Okay, so this we do have to change just because the formatting of the response that we're getting is different. It's not going to be an array. It's actually a JSON itself with the, what was it called again? Statuses. Yep, statuses data that has an array of all of the different statuses. So right now I'm not going to deal with it too much. I'm just going to say, I'm just going to delete this, and then I'm going to just print out the data so that we can see what it's going to give us back. Then later on, we can parse through it and make sure that we're getting each individual field inside of there. All right. So I'm searching again for anything that relates to dog rates. This is the service that I'm using. The parameters, again, is dog rates. And this is the function, the callback function. And so this code inside of here is going to happen when this event happens, so the search happens. So I'm going to run this. Let's see what it gives me. Oh, not that one. That's the previous example. Node, Twitter example, search. And let's see. And there we go. We have some real-time search data here. This is somebody who retweeted that same tweet that we just looked at. And there it goes from here to here. Then here goes another one. It's another retweet. Another retweet. Another retweet. ID string. More retweets of the same thing. It was a very popular tweet. Sorry, this is not the tweet we're looking at. This is a different one. This is the most recent one. This dog's graduation was canceled. Poor thing. This somebody tagged dog rates and another search. Okay, so let's change this up. Let's search for I don't know, coronavirus, which is going to be an interesting search, to say the least. Clear. All right, and now you can see, scroll pull up here. All right, you can see text. Somebody made the tag coronavirus, or used the tag coronavirus. Here, somebody said the word coronavirus. I don't know. This doesn't seem like a great example. I don't like. This is already something that's stressing me out every day anyway. Let's do. I don't know what's something happy that's happening right now. I don't know. NFL. I think the draft is happening right now. Again. Run it again. There we go. We can see NFL is being tweeted out in each of these texts. Shut up and call her pick. Somebody's a Raiders fan. All right. Last one. Let's do B99 for Brooklyn 99, since I'm sure some people are watching that right now. Here we go. And we got a lot of tweets. Yep, B99. There we go. I'm not having very strong memories of when I made my students go through a whole bunch of tweets, and I wrote a quit program to scrub out like all of the bad words so that I could only give them like clean tweets since they're high school students. I didn't quite perfectly write my code so that if somebody misspelled a bad word or implied a bad word, you can get around it. Not that I really wanted to write like a whole machine learning sort of software there to go through all the tweets, but let me just say that high schoolers, when you say that you don't want them to see something like bad words, the moment they do see it, they think they're super special. And so they would shout out, "Hey, I found a tweet with the F word in it." And I was just like, all right, just let's keep it between us. Don't tell anybody that you're looking at tweets with bad words in them. It's not the point of this exercise. But anyway, I trust you all are adults and won't really care that much. But be wary is what I'll say. It is Twitter. It's kind of a lawless land other than Reddit. But anyway, those are my queries. That's what I'm searching. Pretty powerful tool, if you ask me. I know there's I was looking through when I was trying to find some examples to show you all. There's a very quick and easy way for you to make a Twitter bot. Twitter bot example in like super short amount of code. How to make a Twitter bot. And it's using the same stuff we just talked about, and actually it might come in handy more next week when we talk about post. You'll be able to just post and just like push out a whole bunch of tweets essentially and be your own bot there, which is kind of shocking how easy it is to do it. It's not staying behind a paywall or anything. You can just go for it, which is why you should always take anything on Twitter with a grain of salt. You can sort of see what this, looking at it, Pew Research estimates 66% of all tweets containing links are retweeted or retweeted by bots. So you could very easily, I don't know, I could tweet something and then I could have you all create your own Twitter bots. Maybe I should have done this for the exercise. And then you can make me go viral by making a whole bunch of Twitter bots. Maybe next year. Be my ticket to going viral. But yeah, that's if you want to sort of get into that a little bit. Anything else I wanted to talk about? Let me see my notes here. This video is a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I personally, I think this is more interesting than some of the other stuff we talked about. Let's mess with having another parameter. So let's do count. Let's say that I want to get 100. Let's not do 100. Let's do 50 tweets that have the query of I don't know, socks. So anything containing socks, I want 50 of them, and I want you to print them out. So let's go ahead and do that. And clear this. And it gave me 50. I wish socks could be glued on. I wish I could unread that. That's really gross. Why would you want socks glued on your feet? That's what your feet are for. What? um, I'm waiting to see the first person whose entire family is only wearing socks and no shoes in the house when they're, I don't know, not that relevant. Long socks. I don't know what's going on here. It's kind of risky to go through all these tweets without knowing where they're coming from. But let's go ahead and just print out each of the tweets. So here's my task, and this is what I want you to do, and this will be the last part that we'll talk about with these two different tools. Is I want you just to print out the text. So print the text from each tweet, and also tell me. Actually, yeah, that's fine. Let's just do print the text from each tweet. So go ahead, try this using what we sort of know. Pause the video, go ahead and try this out, and see what you get. And so you should get each one in a different line. All right, so assuming you've already tried it, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do this. So I'm going to take a look at my sample here that they've given me, the example response. It's just so that I can see how far I need to go so that I get the text of each tweet. So again, it's going to give me a JSON with one field inside of it for statuses. So I'm going to have to go inside and step inside that JSON and get statuses. That'll give me an array for which each entry is a JSON, which then I can access the text from. So again, it goes top to bottom. It is a JSON with a field for statuses, which inside has an array inside. Each array entry is a JSON. Each entry has a text field. Those are our steps essentially that we're going to have to go through. So let's go ahead and delete this, and we're going to have to do the steps here in this else statement. So let's first get the statuses. So I'm going to do let statuses equal, and everything's in data right now, so I do data dot statuses. All right, so that's getting my statuses. And this is going to have inside of it the array for all of the different JSONs that match this query. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to go ahead and write a quick loop, and I'm going to do let I equals 0. I is less than statuses dot length. I plus plus. And okay, so now I'm going through, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let text equal. This is me getting the text. I'm going to go to each statuses at I, and I'm going to get the text from there. Last thing, console.log text. So it's getting the statuses, which is an array, going through the array and getting the text from each entry inside of there. It's probably a more concise way of saying what I just said. So I saved it. Let's go ahead and run it. And there we go. So now we get the text from all of the different tweets about socks. Cliff Kingsbury, the most loafers with no socks guy of all time. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult there. But there we go. I hope this is helpful because this is something that I wish I'd learned earlier on in my coding practice and earlier on in my major, but or in CS. But I definitely recommend you try it and play around with it. And I've only covered two different two different pieces of the developer API. But look at all of these different things that you can do. Think anything that you can do with a Twitter account, you can do using this developer, using get and post, and essentially just get and post, I believe, is what they use only. Delete here for events and things and DMs, but all this stuff, it's available for you to use. Some of them are locked behind paywalls, but what I just showed you is the ticket for you to be able to use any of these. So just using the URL, you get the data, URL, the parameters, the callback function, which has inside of it the any error data. Excuse me. Any error data, the data itself, and any response. And I'm not going to talk about responses just yet. We'll talk about that most likely next week when we talk about posts, but that'll essentially be it. All right. Again, long video for now, but I'm going to pause right now, and I'm only going to briefly discuss Yelp's API just because I think it's also something kind of useful, and then we'll cut this off and be done with it. All right. See you in the next part, which for you will come up in a second. All right. We're back. So let's go ahead and do this. Take away some of my examples here. We'll come back to it in a moment. All right, so now we're going to be using Yelp, which, if you don't know what Yelp is, essentially it's just a business review site that everybody uses to see what restaurants are good around you. So, for example, here, let's go to Yelp. That's what I use now that I'm stuck in quarantine. Not that I feel like I check all the time to see what restaurants are new, but I know what restaurants are around. I've lived here my whole life, but I always check. Why Princeton? Let's do current location. Are you allowed to see my current location? There we go. This will somewhat give away where I live, but you can sort of see this reviews and shows you I live near Popeyes. And all that sort of information. Now, what you want to be looking at is, again, the developer site for Yelp. So Yelp developers. And this one I'm not going to require that you do for the exercise, but if you want to go for it, again, you might as well try using all these different things now that you have a chance. But Yelp developers, you can make an account, and you'll be able to use this thing called Yelp Fusion, which is what we're going to be looking at, which is their REST API to be able to interact with all their stuff. So let's explore Yelp Fusion. Get started. All right, here we go. So it's gonna create. It's gonna have you create an app. And similarly to Twitter, you have a client ID and an API key that you're going to have to be using in order to receive some of that information. And you'll have to essentially say what you want to use it for. For me, I'm just saying it's for you all to be able to demonstrate. It'll tell you what the limits are for your API. So that way, you don't have to pay for something you don't want to. Refresh your API key, all that sort of stuff is on here. Now, Yelp Fusion, again, is the app that we're using to connect with Yelp. And these are all of the different endpoints. So similar to before when we did like status search and query search and all that sort of different things. These are the different things that you can do. So you can search by business, and each of these inside of it will have the parameters for which you can use. Similar to Twitter. Go back. Phone search, transaction search, business details, business match, reviews, autocomplete, all these different things you can use, which might come in handy, especially autocomplete here. I believe, I never quite was in charge of this, but I believe you can use this if you want to create your own app that integrates Yelp or integrates any sort of business search without you having to sort of upload all of your businesses that you have in your area, you can then just connect to Yelp and use their autocomplete to see which businesses, if somebody's typing in like Bob, that they know go to Bob Shanghai or something like that, that sort of stuff. So we're going to be specifically using business search, and we can sort of see what our, this will be our URL that we're using. These are parameters. At the bottom, it'll show us what the response will look like, similar to Twitter. This one actually also gives you a key, a nice key. I think Twitter is just too big, and so they have a key in other places, but it'll show you and describe to you what each different part of the JSON means, which is nice to have it all in one place. All right. Now, even though I'm going to draw a lot of comparisons between this and Twitter, things are going to work a little different, just because of the way that Yelp Fusion is designed. I'm actually going to be using, I believe this is what Yelp itself has written. Maybe not. This, I think, might be somebody wrote, and I found it. I've been using this for a little bit, but Yelp Fusion, this is specific for using with Node.js, which is what we're doing. And so if you want to come to this guy's GitHub, which I highly recommend, he has really good stuff on here. Very easy to use. GitHub.com/TonyBadGuy/Yelp, or Yelp-Fusion. And he essentially walks through all of the different ways and lots of examples to use their API. All of it's in here. It's all pretty well documented and easy for you to use. So I highly recommend you go to this page. I'll actually put it in the slides right now in case you want to access it. Actually, let's just do it in a new. There, I'll just put it there. But it's all there. So I'm going to follow his instructions here for using his package. And so we want to be able to have the modules for Yelp Fusion in there. So when you get to your example here, just run that command. So do npm install Yelp-Fusion --save. And that will install the necessary modules to be able to use Yelp Fusion. And so I'm just going to go ahead and grab this example here, and I'm going to rewrite it a little bit different just for our own sake here. All right, so I'm going to use this example just because I like the way that it's written, and to sort of demonstrate what this is doing. Now, you'll notice here that there is no callback function. There's no parameter. It doesn't look very similar to the get that we used before. And it's also called search and not get. This is because we're using Yelp Fusion and this guy's specific tools to be able to use Yelp Fusion. But nevertheless, it works exactly the same way, and I'll show you exactly why. Yeah, let's run through it. So first things first, this is something that we've talked about a while back, and we haven't quite seen in a while, is this then and catch. If you remember what these have to do with, kudos to you. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. But essentially, these are what we call JavaScript promises. And so JavaScript promises essentially work in pretty, I don't know, they make sense to me, pretty straightforward way where, okay, there it goes. You can use then, catch, and finally. And so essentially what it means is whatever happens on the left side is going to happen. Then you can put code inside of the then. That will happen next. If an error happens, you can catch that error and then do some code in there. And finally, whatever stuff you want to happen at the very end, you can run there. So you can essentially chain commands all in one place to work pretty intuitively, pretty easily. So if you want to look more in depth with promises, it's all there. But specifically for what you're going to be using with this API, essentially you're going to be saying search for whatever query you put inside of there. Then when you get the response, then it's going to print out the name of the business. That's just the way that it's written, and we'll rewrite this in a moment, so that it makes a little more sense. But also it'll catch the error and display that, and that's essentially it. So essentially it does this command. When that executes, it'll either go here to execute this if it did it correctly, or it'll go here and catch the error and display it. Similar to what we did before, just written a little different. Rather than using the get command, you're just using promises there. And this is purposefully, some people like promises a little better. I'm sure there's some sort of time difference or efficiency difference that promises are a little better, but whatever floats your boat. All right, so let's go ahead and fill out some of these commands here. So for search, we can use all of these different parameters. I'm going to be flipping between his examples over here and the actual Yelp API, mostly because the parameters are all listed here and he doesn't quite use all of them, but here are the parameters. And I'm specifically going to be using term and location. Actually, let me just use term specifically first. So I'm going to do the same way I did before, and I'm going to separate it out, and I'm going to say let search params equal, and I'm going to put it inside of an object, and I'm going to say, what was the name of it again? Term is, and this is going to be the name of the business that I'm looking for, and I'm going to look for Bob's Shanghai. So I'm looking for Bob's Shanghai. Let me make sure that the name that I'm using is correct for whatever Yelp is using. Is the one in Rockville? Yes. Okay. And I know I'm doing a plug for them, but highly recommend soup dumplings. Okay, Bob Shanghai 66 is what I'm going to call it. So Bob Shanghai 66. So this is my search query, the term that I'm searching for. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say client.search for my search parameters. Then with whatever response I get back, which is going to be this is my response. Whoops. Then using that response, using an arrow function here, and you could write your own function in there if you wanted to, an arrow function, do with this response whatever I say here. And let's say that I want to, damn it, come on. Let's say that I want to get the, the name of the first business I get in response. So we can sort of see the response is a JSON that has inside of it several different data points. I'm looking at businesses specifically, which is an array, and then I'm looking in the first one to get the name. And I might as well get the location. Where's location? Location city. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. Open this up, and I'm going to put it side by side with this over here to see. All right, so the response is the whole JSON. Why do I keep covering my mouth? The response is the whole JSON. So I want to go inside the JSON and get businesses specifically. So I'm going to do response dot businesses, and that's an array. And I want to grab the first one, and I'm going to say, all right, I'm in this first entry. I want to get the name of it, so I'm going to do dot name. So that's going in here, going to businesses inside the array, and getting the first name. And I'm just going to console.log that. So I'm going to do console.log of this. And lastly, it'll catch any sort of error there, and that should work just fine. Oh, and I didn't talk about the API key, but you can get your API key I showed you a minute ago. Manage app. I got my API key here, so just copy and paste that in there and right here. All right. I think that's about it. Let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So I'm going to do node Yelp example.js. Client not found. Okay. Client is not defined. Oh, I totally missed the line of code here. I need to do, what was it? Oh, that's what it is. Okay. Just to show you all, I missed a line of code here where you create. So there's the search request. Okay, anyway, I'll just show you. I didn't create the actual client that we're going to be searching from, so I need to create an instance of Yelp. So I just do const client equals, I believe it's new Yelp. It's an object. No, maybe not. I think it's just Yelp. So Yelp.client. And then I pass the API key in there. So wondering where that is coming from. Okay, there we go. So let's try this out. Let's make sure this works. There we go. Okay, I got an error. Status code 400. Create error. Object filter. Projections. Okay, it looks like it's a validation error. Unhandled status. Okay, let me try doing this. It might be that I don't have enough. It's not being specific enough with its. I keep using double quotes. It might be not being specific enough. Actually, let's try this. Maybe it was the double quotes that was causing the issue there. Nope, it wasn't. All right. So we're going to do comma, location is Rockville, comma, Maryland. Location. Yep, and you can sort of see here what the search requests should look like. So I'm going to try that again. All right, cannot read. Okay, let me try this again. Let me clear it out. Okay. All right, gave me cannot read property 0 of undefined. I think I will need to parse it, which is annoying. Yeah. All right, so the response that you're getting back, I think you have to call a JSON body, yeah. JSON body. Try this again. Cannot read property businesses. Of something that is undefined. didn't say body with capital B. There we go. Okay, finally. The problems with using somebody else's node, essentially REST operations. So essentially, with your response, it's not going to immediately give you the JSON for it, so you have to call .json body, and then you can parse through the JSON and get each individual piece of information. Yeah, that's about it. So it essentially gives you the business based on these two queries here. I can also write a loop inside of here. Let me format this a little better because I don't like the way that there we go. So in here in the then, I can call and I can write a different function to go through all of the different search results and stuff like that. But this is what I'm trying. So again, I highly recommend that you go through this page and sort of take a look at any of these different events that you want to use with Yelp. Also, lots of different pages out there have APIs for you to use. I know Reddit has a good one. Reddit API documentation. I haven't actually looked at it, but response. Okay, there's a get, and you can get the identity of a user, the karma, all these different things. Like you can look at collections, all these different things in there, and you'll see everything will look roughly similar because you're using the same formatting of you're using this URL, which is essentially you're using this service. You have to make sure that you have an account with them and have your keys all set up fine. And essentially you just read through and look through some examples and see how their examples sort of work. That's what I did with Yelp just before this video to see how we can use it. And I'm sure that there's somebody has built a service for using for Node specifically. I think that's about it that I have for you all. As for things to walk away with, I know this is from the last video from when we talked about Express, but for this video as well, things that I would like you to walk away with is what is an API? I want you to set up an app in Twitter. And also I want you to be able to grab a tweet /search for a tweet. Yelp is sort of an adjacent Yelp API. Not as important if you have time to go for it. I think that's about it for you all. Thank you for bearing with me and sort of going through that. But that's about it. Anything else in my notes that I wanted to talk about? No, that's it. So let me know if you have questions. Stay posted for exercise. What is it? 5 at this point. Will be posted shortly after this video, hopefully. And then we should be good to go. But yeah, take care.